I want to talk about abortion in Islam. It's an important topic that um, Western countries are dealing with in their own way. And it's a very um, important topic, certainly in the US. The situation is a little bit different here in Canada. We have a different approach to abortion in Canada as opposed to the US. But nonetheless, there is an obvious divide between the conservatives and the libs. And I wanted to make this video in order to share another perspective, obviously, that is religious. It's an Islamic perspective. And I hope that it can be informative for those people who are not within Islam, but are interested in the viewpoint of a Muslim perspective, as well as those who are within the religion of Islam who may be interested in this topic. One of the first things I would say regarding this topic is that Islam does not see the fetus of an unborn child as having the full status of a human being. However, it puts more of an emphasis, however, on the potential for the life of the fetus to come to term. And in this way, we are similar to that of the Christian view or the conservative view that believes that the right of the child to life is very important. When is a woman considered to be pregnant in Islam? This is one of the important questions that that a lot of people think about and don't always have the answers for. But from an Islamic point of view, pregnancy begins when the fertilized ovum implants itself onto the wall of the uterus. Now, anything up until that point that prevents this from happening, from an Islamic perspective, is not considered abortion. However, anything that terminates the pregnancy after the fertilized egg has implanted itself on the uterus wall, it's considered an abortion and is therefore haram or has certain financial penalties that come with it. We know, obviously, when it comes to abortion, there's a lot of reasons that people may have as to why they may want to have an abortion. And of course, I'm just going to go through a list of them and just give you an Islamic perspective or Islam's reaction to these reasons. So the first of them could be that a woman gets pregnant but prefers to have a career over having a child at that time in her life. Now, Islam says in this case, do not kill your children for fear of poverty. We will provide for them and for you. Surely the killing of children is a great error. Now, a woman may not have a career, right? She may be at an early stage of her life, in her school in life. And so she may see that having a child could undermine her ability to finish school and therefore have a successful career. And so finance becomes an issue for her, among other things, of course. But the Quran says that that is not a reason for abortion. The worry of finance is not a condition for an abortion. And again, she may choose, another reason may be for having a luxurious lifestyle, right? A person could already be, could be on their way towards getting that promotion or that job that that they've already gone to school for. But for some reason, maybe they were obviously, it was like unexpected, they got pregnant, and they worry that it may affect their lifestyle, right? They may not be able to enjoy their luxurious lifestyle or even have their luxurious lifestyle because now they have to worry about an unborn, giving birth to, or bringing life into the world and taking care of it. Another reason could be that, the child may turn out to be a sex that they are not comfortable with, right? It could be a girl or it can even be a boy. Islam says that no, this is not a good enough or valid reason to abort a child. Instances of rape, Islam says that even there too, it is not permissible to have an abortion. The reasoning behind this is that it says it says two things. It says that if it can be prevented, by all means, use the morning after pill or any other medical contraceptive that may be available. If, however, one is not able to use these treatments in time, that the child shouldn't have to pay for the sins of the father. And so they say it's still not a sufficient condition. Now, there is also the possibility of wanting to abort the fetus because one might be informed by the doctors that this child may be born with some kind of medical defect, right? Again, scholars say that this is not a sufficient reason to abort a child. So the question then, well, when is abortion allowed? Abortion is allowed only when doctors declare with reasonable certainty that the continuation of pregnancy will endanger the woman's life. Now, this criteria or this decision is based on the principle of the lesser of two evils, known in Islamic legal terminology as al-aham wal-muhim. In English, it translates to the more important and the less important. We have a tradition from the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, in which he says that when two forbidden things come upon a person, then the lesser will be sacrificed for the greater. So this is where this principle comes from this hadith. So in this particular context, obviously, the life of the unborn child versus the life of the mother is seen to be the lesser of two things, or lesser of two evils, in the sense that if one is having to choose between which of the life is to be lost, obviously the life of the unborn child is lesser than the life of the mother, right? So Islam says here in this case that it is permissible to have an abortion. Now, there's also the question that comes to light that most people are curious about. Well, when does life enter into the fetus? And I will eventually get to that, but I want to talk a little bit about about the souls that enter or engender the fetus at different stages. And it also will touch on this particular question. So, according to a known hadith from Imam Ali al-Islam, he says that the fetus or the human being has 4 souls. The first is the vegetable soul, the second is the animal soul, the third is the human soul or the rational soul, and then the spirit. He says that each soul has 5 strengths and abilities, and then 2 properties. Of the vegetable soul, he says that it has the ability to retain, absorb, digest, repel, and grow. Its 2 properties are increase and decrease. The origination of this soul is from the liver. So in other words, the liver plays a significant role in the development of the physical fetus, and that becomes itself a type of soul. Then he says there is the sensual or animal soul, and that the strengths of or abilities of the soul is that it can hear, see, smell, taste, and touch. And its 2 properties are pleasure and anger. And this soul comes from the heart. And then he says there is the rational or human soul. And this soul has the ability of contemplation, remembrance, attaining knowledge, understanding, and alertness. And its 2 properties are righteousness and wisdom. This soul does not have a bodily source from which it originates. And lastly, he says there is the godly soul. And what he's referring to here is the actual ruh or spirit. And he says here that this spirit has the ability to persist after death, to find happiness in misfortune, dignity in humility, needlessness in poverty, and perseverance in calamities. Its 2 properties are pleasure and acceptance at the decree of God. The origin of such a soul is from Allah, and to Him it returns. Now, the reference, of course, for this type of soul or spirit is, as he says, is from Allah, and it's found in the Quran, in which God says in chapter 15, verse 29, God has said in the Quran, and when I blow my spirit into him, and the verse continues, bow down to Adam. So a couple of points we should keep in mind. That human beings are characterized by the 3rd kind of soul, which is the human or rational soul, but also possess animal and vegetable souls in a manner that seems to be progressive and evolutionary. The developing human fetus can be described as having the vegetable soul prior to the animal soul, which in turn is present before the human soul. And the human soul has the ability to reason. This is its important feature. What's important to keep in mind is that the human soul is not something that is separate from the body and enters it, but is something that is produced at a particular stage in the development of the body. In the Islamic literature, there's this term called ensoulment, and it's important for us to understand what it really means. So ensoulment is when the human soul enters into or emerges from the fetus. This is called ensoulment. Now, they say that the spirit plays a role in the emergence and evolution of this human soul. The Quran describes the stages of a developing fetus in chapter 23, verse 14, suggesting that the spirit enters the growing fetus when the bones are covered with flesh. Now, in this chapter or verse of the Quran, it reads, "Then we made the sperm into a clot of congealed blood. Then of that clot we made a fetus lump. Then we made out of that lump bones and clothed the bones with flesh. Then we developed out of it another creature. So blessed be Allah, the best to create." Now we have a hadith from Imam Rida al-Islam who supports this view, stating that full blood money must be paid for a fetus aborted at 4 months, as it is considered a full human being at this stage. Therefore, it can be concluded that at the 4-month stage of a fetus, that fetus is deemed to possess a rational soul or a human soul. So, simply put, if someone wants to know when the fetus become an actual living being, it typically occurs at the 4-month mark. And this process is called ensoulment. And in the case of the blood money, we do find a difference in the status of a fetus prior to and after the stage of ensoulment. There is a detailed narration from Imam Ali which states, if the fetus is aborted prior to the coming of the soul at the point of ensoulment, then the blood money will be 100 dinars divided into 5 parts. Now, what he's saying here is that even before ensoulment occurs, where at this point we're looking at 4 months, he's saying that while there is a financial penalty if someone were to abort their fetus at 4 months, that's being referred to as paying the blood money. And paying the blood money in full is a recognition or an admission that the fetus is considered to be a full human being. However, there is still a financial penalty to pay anytime one aborts, even prior to the stage of ensoulment, or even prior to the stage of 4 months in. And he says that this blood money or this penalty or this payment money will be 100 dinars divided into 5 parts, as follows, in accordance with the stages of the developing fetus as described by the verse 23, chapter 23, 14. So, in that chapter, in that verse, it talks about the various gestational points or sessions of creation, right? So, for instance, it talks about, then we made the sperm into a clot of congealed blood. Then of the clot we made a fetus or a lump. Then we made out of that lump bones, and then we clothed the bones. So these are all gestational periods that, depending on where you abort in these gestational periods, there is a financial penalty for that. And so what he says is that regarding the first gestational period, where he says the fertilized ovum, right, which is actually in Islam considered the point where pregnancy actually begins. Up until this point, any contraceptive use is not considered abortion. It's just merely considered prevention. Once the egg implants itself on the uterus wall, this is the sort of pregnancy within Islam. And he says that if you do anything to abort at this point, he says that there is a financial penalty of 20 dinars. And of the other gestational period, he says a clot of blood. He says there, if you abort there, it's 40 dinars. And then he says a lump of flesh, if you abort there, 60 dinars. And then he says bones, if you abort where the bones have started, he says, well, then there is 80 dinars you have to pay. And he says, okay, let's say if you abort after the bones and where there's flesh appearing on the bones, he says there, it's 100 dinars. After the coming of the Spirit, it will be the full blood money. Now, this just means at the point of ensoulment, because once the soul comes, so does the spirit. And this is where you have a full human being. And he says that if you abort at the 4-month mark and after, then you would have aborted a full human being. And at that point, the financial penalty is 1,000 dinars. In the case of if the fetus is considered a male, and in the case if the fetus is a female, it's 500 dinars. So ensoulment indicates that abortion is unlawful and implies that the potentiality for ensoulment within the fetus is a determining factor in prohibiting abortion, right? Because not only is it forbidden at the time of ensoulment, which is 4 months, but it is also forbidden even prior to that. And we know this because there is financial penalties that seems to increase as the fetus evolves. So the fact that this fetus is becoming a human being is perhaps more important from an Islamic point of view, why we shouldn't abort, as opposed to just as opposed to the question of when does this fetus become a full human being or has the status of a full human being. We know the answer to that is 4 months. However, we are seeing even before the 4-month mark, depending on where you are on the gestational periods, Islam is saying there is a financial penalty and it's considered abortion. And therefore, having those penalties are indications, clear indications that you shouldn't be aborting this fetus, even at the stages prior to ensoulment, where the fetus becomes a full human being. So the point here is to say that Islam, while it is also protective of the fetus at the stage of ensoulment, 4 months in, it is also protective of the fetus in terms of that every other stage up until the 4-month is considered stages of potentiality, right? At each stage is the potential of reaching the other stages of gestational growth and development, which ultimately leads to becoming a full human being at 4 months. And so Islam is preoccupied with preventing abortion right up until the ovum is fertilized and it rests onto the uterus wall. In terms of the cleric view, right, the law basically states this, that Islamic abortion is based on the following principles. Namely, that abortion is forbidden after implantation of the fertilized ovum, which rests on the uterus wall. And then every other from there is development then goes into the various stages. And in fact, we have a hadith from one of the imams that says that the gestational period of it being a clot of blood, then developing into a fetus, a lump of flesh, and then just as the gestational period of it turning into bones, and then the gestational period of it having been clothed with flesh. Each of these gestational periods, the Imam says, is marked or divided by 40 days. Okay, so it takes 40 days before it moves out of those gestational periods of growth and development. And each has, each gets us closer and closer to the period of ensoulment of 4 months. And there are penalties that that is imposed if their abortion occurs during that time. Now, the Sharia or Islamic law forbids abortion without any valid reason at the earliest possible stages. So, although there may be a financial penalty to pay, it's still not permissible to go ahead with an abortion simply because one might be able to financially afford to cover the cost of that abortion prior to the stages of ensoulment, prior to 4 months. Islam says that one must have a valid reason, and typically here we're seeing a valid reason has to do with whether it's a threat to the life of the mother, or some other medical condition that can seriously make her life uncomfortable or difficult in some way. And of course, abortion, like we said, is permissible if it results in the danger, if it results in endangering the life of the mother. I want to thank you for your time. Inshallah, I hope that the information that I've shared here with you can be something to reflect on and to consider, and inshallah benefits you. Please keep me in your du'as. Assalamu alaikum. Take care.